He needs a rhyme, Inigo explained to Wesley, then to Fezzik. Fezzik is no zero. Fezzik shivered even more. Do you want a hint? Inigo shrieked as the boat began to splinter. Still the shivering. He's a hero, Inigo went on. Fezzik would have none of it. Put his head in his hands. What could he be afraid of? Buttercup cried out. Fezzik, Wesley shouted into Fezzik's ear. Are you afraid of the sharks? Even worse shivering, and a shake of the head. Now the whirlpool was starting to spin them. Is it the sucking squid? Still worse, and another shake of the head. Now the whirlpool began to pull them down. Is it the sea monsters? More shivering, more shaking. And Wesley, aware that they had next to no chance of survival the way things were going, cried, Tell me! Fezzik buried his head in his hands. And then from Wesley, the loudest shout of all, Nothing is worse than sea monsters. What are you so afraid of? Fezzik raised his great head and managed to look at them. Getting water up my nose, he whispered. I hate it so much. And then he buried his head again. The boat was shattering by this time. In the final moments they clung to the remnants, and Wesley said, I am too weak for the task. Inigo, you do it. And Inigo said, I am a Spaniard. I do not hold another man's nose. And Buttercup, not for the last time, heard herself say, You men. And then, as the whirlpool had them in its power, she took both of her hands and clamped them over Fezzik's nose. I had a thought about Buttercup. I think Buttercup definitely has more personality. I was saying something about Buttercup. Yeah, just that Buttercup feels like she has more dimension than she did in the movie, which I like. She definitely had a lot of character growth in the first chapter, and then now just for her to be like, oh, I'm just gonna, you guys aren't stepping up, so I'm gonna do it, and she goes over and helps Fezzik. I think that's really cool. The whirlpool knew from the first it had them. It had not lost a battle in centuries, not since a soldier coming home from the Crusades caught it at a remarkably calm time, managed to slip almost past, was but a few feet from One Tree's shore before exhausted. He collapsed backward, and the whirlpool made no mistakes this time, just kept him down at the bottom longer than it had ever kept anyone, before releasing its grip, letting him float up toward where the sharks waited. The sharks were waiting this day too, excited, 4 to shred, and they swam just at the outskirts of the whirlpool, watching as the bodies sank. Fezzik made no resistance whatsoever, did nothing till he was certain Buttercup's grip was solid. The whirlpool took them under, sped them down on their way to the bottom, and Fezzik let it happen, hoping only that the others could hold their breaths longer than they ever had, and soon he could feel the bottom of the sea. It was not deep here. Whirlpools did not love deep water, and Fezzik bunched his giant body and shoved down with his mighty legs, shoved harder than he ever had before. And as soon as his body began its upward trajectory, he started with his arms, his great tireless arms, windmilling them with more ferocity than the whirlpool had ever known. And it did what it could, increased its roar, swirled more savagely, but the arms would not stop. Nothing could make them stop, and the chains held, and the others were unconscious from the battle, but Fezzik knew, as soon as he surfaced at the far end of the whirlpool, that Inigo had been right with his rhyme. He was definitely not a zero, not this day of days. They were still chained when they reached the shore of One Tree, and they stayed that way for 2 days, all of them motionless, near dead from wounds and torture and exhaustion. Then they unchained themselves, and staying close together, began to explore their new home. Me, obviously, and I'm sorry, but you don't want to read 10 pages on vegetation. Morgenstern's tree fixation scores again. His point here is that one tree being pretty close to Eden is what all of Florin could be if only people didn't chop everything down. The 4 get their strength back slowly. Buttercup nurses them, and Fezzik takes care of food, cooking, and cleaning the fish that was most of their diet. Buttercup one day has nothing special going on, so she makes him a gift for his nose, a clothespin. Well, Fezzik goes nuts. He's so happy. It fits perfectly, he's never without it, etc., etc. And armed with that, Fezzik becomes the scourge of the area, swimming all over, fighting sharks and sucking squids, tastes like chicken. I thought the more squeamish among you would be glad for that bit of info, bringing his catch of the day back for food. Anyway, this section ends with the moon high. Perfect night, very romantic, all that. Inigo and Fezzik are off in their tents, dozing, Buttercup and Wesley sitting alone by a flickering fire. You know, we've only kissed, Buttercup said, staring at the embers. Of course, Wesley replied. Not getting the answer she expected, Buttercup tried again. We've certainly had more than our share of adventures, no one can deny it. And true love. To have that, we must be the most blessed of creatures. Surely the most blessed, Wesley agreed. But, Buttercup said then, trying for frivolity, thus far, the unalloyed fact that shines out is this. We have only kissed. What else is there? Wesley asked. He touched his lips lightly to her cheek, sighed. Surely there could be nothing more. This was somewhat disingenuous on his part, because he had been king of the sea for several years, and, well, things happened. Silly lad, she told him, smiling. I have enough knowledge for us both. Of course I should, considering all those classes in lovemaking I took at royalty school. She had taken the classes, but since Humperdinck had instructed her professors to teach her nothing whatsoever, Buttercup, though she smiled, was terrified. I am anxious for your teachings to begin. She looked at his perfect face. She thought that, more than anything, she wanted this to go as it had in her heart. But what if she failed? What if she was just another case of big talk, little do, and eventually he would tire of her, leave her? I know so much it is hard to be sure just where is the best place to begin. If I go too fast, raise your hand. He waited, and when he saw the helplessness in her eyes, he realized he had never loved her quite so much or so deeply. Will you try not to laugh at me? I would never embarrass a beginner such as yourself. It would be cruelty itself to mock your ignorance when I, of course, am totally wise. Do we begin standing up or lying down? A very good question, that, Buttercup said quickly, not having the least notion what else to say. There is great controversy as to which. Well, perhaps it would be wise to cover both contingencies. Why don't I get a blanket in case lying down carries the day? The blanket he brought and spread for them was soft, the pillow softer still. If we were to lie down, Wesley said, lying down, would we start close together on the blanket or far apart? Again, great controversy, she replied. You see, one of the problems with knowing so much is one sees both sides of questions. You are very patient with me, and I appreciate that. He held out a hand for her. We could do this. We could try lying close together on the blanket and experiment, more or less. Buttercup took his strong hand. My professors were all in favor of experimenting. They were very close on the blanket now. The breeze, seeing this, knowing what they had been through to reach this moment, thought it might be nice to caress them. The stars, seeing this, thought it might be nice if they dimmed for a while. The moon went along with the whole notion, slipping half behind a cloud. Buttercup still held his hand. She wondered for a moment if it would be wise to stop now, tell truths, try again another evening. She was about to suggest that, but then she looked deeply into his eyes. They were the color of the sea before a storm, and what she read in them gave her the strength to continue. Want a shocker? Willie liked that scene. I remember when my father read The Princess Bride to me, I hated the kissing stuff. I told him before I read it he might find it a little... What? I told him before he read it he might find it a little short on daring do, so maybe that helped. His only question after was what kind of things happened when Wesley was king of the sea. I wondered that too. That did cross my mind. I was like, you just gloss over the things happened. I answered that if Morgenstern had wanted us to know, he would have told us. He bought it. Phew. Anyway, you will probably not be surprised to learn the obligatory 9 months flew by pretty fast. I think sunset would be a lovely time, Buttercup said. I think he would like that, opening his eyes to the world at that moment. Yes, sunset it shall be. She was speaking at breakfast to the others, and they all agreed. In point of fact, since none of them had the least experience with birthing, they could hardly argue, and no one could argue with Buttercup's handling of herself. She had blossomed in the 9 months since she and Wesley first made love, had dealt with her situation with a serenity remarkable in one so young. True, the first months brought a touch of morning sickness, and yes, it was discomforting, but all she had to do to banish it was look at Wesley and tell herself she was bringing another such as he into the universe. And poof, the sickness was in retreat. She knew their firstborn would be a boy. She had a dream the first month that it would be so. The dream recurred 2 more times, and after that she never doubted, and she behaved throughout as if this were the most normal of human conditions. You swelled, certainly, but that didn't stop you from your regular life, which in her case often consisted of helping Fezzik cook, helping Inigo mend his heart, walking and talking with Wesley, discussing their future, where they would settle, what they might do with the rest of their lives, considering that the most powerful man on earth was out to kill them. After the meal, she was ready. Wesley had made her a special birthing bed, the softest straw and pillows softer still. It faced west, and he built a nearby fire, and he had kettles boiling with pure water. An hour before sunset, when her contractions were but 5 minutes apart, he carried her to the bed and set her gently down, and sat alongside her, massaging her. She was so happy, as was he, and by the time the sun was starting to set, the contractions were but 2 minutes apart. Buttercup stared at the sun and smiled, took his hand and whispered to him, "It's what I always wanted most on earth, bringing your son into life at such a time, with you beside me." They were both so happy, and Wesley told her, "We are one heartbeat," and she kissed him softly and said, "And will always be." During this, Inigo was fencing with shadows, excellent practice if you had no proper opponent to play with. Wesley, of course, was superb, and they had spent many happy hours slashing away at each other. But now, as sunset ended, Inigo made ready to stop soon and go welcome the baby. Fezzik usually watched them, or Inigo alone when that was the case, but not this night. He was hiding on the far side of one tree, the sky topper, and he was holding his stomach and trying not to groan and be a bother. But the truth was this: for the strongest man on earth, for a man who earned his living inflicting pain, Fezzik was squeamish. He could handle blood, as well as the next fighter, when it came from an opponent. But he had asked Wesley and Inigo what it was going to be like when Buttercup's son was born, and though neither of them were expert, they both indicated there might be some blood as well as other stuff. Fezzik rolled on the ground as the phrase "other stuff" went through his being. There was a Turkish word that described such things. Büyük. Fezzik held his stomach and thought "büyük" over and over. He knew, from looking at the stars overhead, that the boy was shortly to arrive. But by midnight, they knew something was wrong. The contractions were but a minute apart as they looked out at the sun's afterglow, but that is where they stayed. At 10 they were still as before, and Buttercup would have handled it quietly, as she had the preceding hours, but at midnight her back began to spasm. She could withstand that. Wesley was beside her. What were spasms? She was settling in for a long visit with them, until the pain crept from her back to her hips, found one leg, then both, set them on fire. The blaze in her legs was the beginning of her torment. Her color faded, but she was still Buttercup, and she was lit by the glow from the flames. She was still, then, something to see. It was not till dawn that they saw what the pain had done to her. Hi there. Thanks for joining our book club. If you'd like to join the conversation, I would love it if you would leave us a comment. And if you'd like to see more, check out the playlist.